Welcome, everyone. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host of all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998 and is a leading resource for faith-based animal rights veganism. Led by our executive director, Tams Nicholson, we provide free resources for people seeking to live compassionately towards all creatures. Our extensive library includes vegan sermons and commentaries, animal rights strategies, action alerts, events, and works by various vegan authors. We also sponsor websites for animal rights organizations. Our mission is to unite compassionate individuals worldwide who honor the dignity of all creatures. So I'm very excited for today's broadcast. We are here with Christina Karras and Beatrice M. Friedlander. Christina is a supporter of Attorney for Animals and a volunteer advocate for non-human animals and the natural environment. She draws on her professional experience in writing, research, and public policy to help advance laws, policies, and regulations for their protection. With a special interest in wildlife, she has worked on issues affecting deer, birds, coyotes, and wolves. She also promotes efforts to replace animals in medical and scientific research. Christina aspires to encourage others who share this love of animals and nature to find ways of using their own distinctive talents and knowledge as advocates. B is an attorney and member of the State Bar of Michigan who has practiced law and now focuses on animals in law, legislation, and public policy. A founding and current member of Attorneys for Animals Incorporated and the State Bar of Michigan Animal Law section, she analyzes and reports on bills that impact animals and works with legislators to advise on proposed legislation. She frequently testifies at Michigan Legislature committee hearings to support animal-friendly bills and oppose those that negatively impact animals. She is an adjunct associate professor at Madonna University's Animal Studies BA program, teaching animals in law and policies. B holds JD and BA sociology degrees from the Ohio State University and a certificate from the nonprofit sector studies baccalaureate program at the Wayne State University. She and her husband share their home with two tuxedo cats, Stella and Katniss. So, welcome, ladies. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm excited to have you here because of your knowledge, and our executive director, Tams Nicholson, saw an article and that Christina had written. And she said, we've got to get these ladies on the show. And so it's happening today. So thanks for joining us, everyone. And thank you all for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, I appreciate it. And now I know that Tams was behind this. So Tams, if you're listening, thank you. She's a Michigander now, too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps we should say where we are. I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and also I'm from Michigan, and I didn't mention my education in the bio that Mariquita read, but I attended the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for undergraduate and also the Graduate School for Public Policy. And I also have a degree in English from Boston College. So I've lived in Boston as well, but I'm from Michigan, live in Ann Arbor currently, and have a family home in Petoskey, Michigan, which is up on Lake Michigan in the northern lower peninsula.
And you have a cat.
Not currently with me, but yes, she is currently in Petoskey.
Wonderful. And then, and B, you're in Michigan as well.
Yes, I'm in Canton, which is a suburb of Detroit, but we're actually closer to Ann Arbor than we are to Detroit. So we're both Southeast Michigan.
Well, wonderful. Yes. And Tams is making her beautiful home and getting everything ready for her cats, working on our catio, and just really getting settled in Michigan. So I'm so happy for her. And there she is.
Hi, everyone. I just thought I'd pop in and say hi. So glad to have you, Bea and Christina. I'm so glad you can do this interview.
Thank you. Welcome to Michigan.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll leave you two now. I look forward to listening. And everyone, thank you again so much for all your work. It's so, so appreciated and valued.
Thank you, Tam.
Thank you. Thank you, Tams. All right. So, Christina, let's hear about your advocacy. When did it start? And tell us about, I'd love to hear about your vegan journeys.
I will try to, in a sense, I'm definitely more of a writer than a speaker, but I will try to recapture a bit of what I wrote in that article because it did sort of describe my journey into advocacy. And it's odd because I haven't always been this sort of environmentally passionate animal wildlife person that I am today. I guess it was always in me, though, being from Michigan, and we camped, and I had a lot of exposure to nature and the outdoors, and of course I love animals as I think most children do. But then years of city life, I spent some time in Washington D.C. and also in Boston, and that was as a young adult for 14 years, I believe. That's what actually led me back to realizing I needed to move back to Michigan, someplace where I could be close to nature, and reconnect with that side of myself, because it just started to really be a yearning. And I realized what a happier, better person I was when I spent time in nature and with animals and just observing them, learning. There's something about watching other creatures, other species live their lives and really see what their priorities are that suddenly makes you reassess your priorities and the way we live our human lives. And I learn a lot from that, and I gain a lot of wisdom from that. And so I moved back here, and but prior to that, I was starting to tap into the advocacy and the policy side of things, because I think I came to it through one of the, I think, very popular animals, which is wolves, and birds. So, which I think are very common ways for people to become interested in wildlife. People are fascinated by wolves, and so many people are birders, and it's just becoming ever more popular. So, but as I started learning more about the issues they're facing, whether it be through the law and the government, or issues through the climate change and other issues stressing these animals' existence, I became more interested in how I could help and advocate for them. So I just started becoming more informed, more educated on that, doing what I could to help out. And that's just how I got involved.
That's wonderful, though. I know the connection as a child. I mean, we're all connected as children to animals. Most of us are, and some of us lose that. So it's beautiful that you tap back into that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. What about you, Bea? What about how did you come upon this path?
I was something of a rebel and an advocate in undergraduate, and that was the late 60s, early 70s, and it didn't have anything to do with animals. It was more the anti-war protests. And I think I probably got that from my parents, who, when they were younger, were quite active in social justice movements, which I consider animal advocacy to be. And in looking back as to why I started on this path to animal advocacy, animal rights, veganism, I have to say that it was the result of the relationship that I had with my German Shepherd, whose name is Erica. And she lived with me for 13 years from 1972, and then she died in 1985, or 40 years ago. But that was that period of my life, I was quite, I moved a lot. I finished up undergrad, law school, went to New York, went to Michigan, and she was the one constant in my life. And it was years later that I looked back on it and realized that, without thinking about it, that she and the relationship that I had with her is what prompted me to look at how animals are treated. And at the beginning, not so much about law and policy. That really was not on my radar at all until the early 1990s, when a woman named Wanda Nash, who I considered to be my mentor, took out a little ad in the Michigan Bar Journal that said, "Attorneys interested in animal law, contact me." And I always thought the term light bulb moment was just, oh, come on. But that was a light bulb moment for me. And probably about 20 attorneys responded. Of course, in those days, it was phone calls and faxes, and we had to figure out sort of a central location to meet in person. But from that came Attorneys for Animals. So we are probably about 30 years old now. And one of our major goals was to form a statewide animal law section within the State Bar of Michigan. And we did that in 1995, and we're the first statewide bar association to have an animal law section. So we're quite proud of that, really. And then, to answer the veganism thing, and it probably all happened around the same time, after Erica died, and I'm starting to look into this. And so I became a vegetarian, lacto-ovo vegetarian. It took me a while to come up to where I could just avoid eating meat, basically, which was what it was, or seafood too, in 1989. And as I learned more and read more, I realized that the difference between being vegetarian and veganism is huge and involves billions of animals. But I still was not super speedy about it. So in the year 2000, I became a vegan. So that's kind of my story.
Yes.
Can I say that I find your story about Erica so touching, and I know we've spoken about this before, but for everyone else, I had a similar experience with Simone, my cat. This moving and going through graduate school and various career paths and significant moments in your life. And she had a lot of medical needs. And so I kind of became an uncertified vet tech, learning, and just did the deep dive into feline nutrition and health, and learned how to, do all the little home treatments and things and care for her. And that is definitely a way to form a bond with another species, and to just life-changing relationships that you can have with you know, someone who's not a human, but it's just as powerful of a relationship and just as meaningful in your life, and it really changes you. So yeah, I understand that story.
Yeah,
Thank
those
you.
stories are very powerful. Very powerful. When you have that connection, that soul to soul connection, it changes your life.
Mhm.
It does. So
Well, so let me ask, okay, first of all, Christina, tell us where we can find your article for those that haven't read it.
well, that was in the AFA, the Attorneys for Animals newsletter. So I don't know how to get that around, but
I can send a link to the newsletter, but if you want, I can break out her story and make it into a separate URL.
okay.
All right, yeah.
Oh.
So
I'll do that.
thank
I
you.
probably can't multitask and do it now.
Do it now. Don't do it now.
Yes, don't worry about that now. So for that, for someone who has no idea about law and policy and but might be interested in starting this path, what would you say to that person? Where's the beginning of this? I mean, do you have to go to school? I mean, what do you need to do?
Oh, see, I feel very strongly that no, you don't need to be an expert, and this is something I find is a mission of mine, to really allow people to feel empowered to be an advocate without the high bar of expertise that you might feel that you need, because that imposter syndrome can be strong, and I think it can be a hurdle people face. But there are a lot of resources out there, and it doesn't have to, you don't have to start huge. You know, these can be easy steps by simply going through other organizations that do the research and the writing for you. You can start with organizations like AFA, also, you know, Humane World for Animals, formerly the Humane Society of the United States. I really like the Center for Biological Diversity for wildlife and environmental issues. There are many organizations out there. Audubon Society, if you're a birder, you know, you can find them all, and go to their action centers. Read up, you know, they'll have a lot of resources if you do want to really educate yourself and steep yourself in the research. Certainly, I encourage everyone to do so and to be an informed advocate. But to take action, you can simply follow their lead on their action alerts, and they make it very simple to contact legislators or the federal government to comment on regulations. So B probably has a myriad tips as well, but that's where I would start.
Well, animal law and policy. So how I define policy is what the government, and broadly defined, so that includes all levels of government, includes elected officials, as well as agencies such as the Department of Natural Resources in Michigan. Other states have similar, the USDA at the federal level. So what the government broadly defines, chooses to do or not to do about an issue. So that's quite broad. And along with that, and in my bio, I said, you know, I do some teaching. So I've honed this for my students who are undergraduates. But you then want to look at categories of what I call influencers. Now, I know these days that means social media influencers who have millions of followers and get lots of money from cosmetics companies or clothing, but I mean it in a broader sense, that there are categories of individuals or organizations who can influence policy. And some of those are like organizations, small or large. Uh, it can be our nonprofit, animal friendly, or it can be, JBS, the biggest animal producer in the world. So organizations, social media, other media, religion. Um, it can be just kind of the general public. It can be academics. So if you look at it broadly, what I try to say is I try to expand who can do that. You don't have to go to law school. Now, obviously, to be an attorney and bring cases in court, you have to be an attorney and you have to be admitted in a particular state. But you don't have to be an attorney or have an advanced degree. There are several universities around the country where you can get non-law degrees, but in animal policy. So some people are very interested in that, and I encourage people to look at that. But you don't have to have a special degree or letters after your name. If you look at it, as I said, this is a social justice movement, but it's also part of democracy, which is so important these days. And what attorneys for animals seeks to do is to provide resources, information, updated. We have what we call a legislative tracker, where we track bills on a monthly basis in both the Michigan Legislature and in Congress. We do more direct work in Michigan. The other thing that is important for people who care about animals to realize is there's this whole other system, and those are the agencies, which I mentioned before. And those are more accessible than, going into court, or even though it's not as daunting as people might think, going to a Michigan Legislature committee hearing. So we try to get people who care about animals to see that it's possible for them to do advocacy. In fact, our tagline is bringing animal law to animal advocates. And we have attorney members and law student members and advocate members. And I'll say one more thing, and Christina is an example there. One of the things that makes me the most proud of Attorneys for Animals is that various people, including Christina, have found that our newsletters, our social media, our legislative tracker, calls to action, etc., have been useful, and they will reach out to me and say, I read what you said about the Canada geese and what the DNR and NRC are doing, and I want to help. So I was very fortunate because Christina's background as a writer and a policy person, although in a different area, has been really helpful. And we can talk about that a little more later. But I just encourage people, don't get intimidated, and don't think you need to go to law school or get an advanced degree. If you care about it, you can find a way to make your voice heard.
And thanks, B. And starting local can, as you mentioned, there are all levels of government. Sometimes starting local can be the most accessible, the easiest, because it's what's right in your backyard. Therefore, you are familiar with it. Who better qualified to speak about a topic than you, who is a community member? But it does go up the chain as well. As just to clarify, if a law is passed, that's not and signed into, if legislation's passed, signed into law at the federal level and at the state level, it doesn't stop there. It has to be implemented, and it becomes implemented by and large by the federal agencies via regulation and other vehicles. But that's where the rubber meets the road. And so that's when I just wanted to make that clear when we speak about commenting on regulation to an agency, and the USDA, the EPA, the Department of Interior covers a lot of wildlife, the U.S.
Fish and Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife Services. Thank you. These are the people I write to most frequently, and I forgot their name. FWS, Fish and Wildlife Services, the Bureau of Land Management. There are animals covered under their sort of jurisdiction, if you will, as well. But you don't need to know all of it. Again, I'm getting into the weeds, and we're trying to simplify, but for people. But I thought it was important to clarify kind of how some of these things play out, and as well in the courts. And when I first learned of attorneys for animals, it was right around the time I was starting to realize how important and influential the legal system is for animals and wildlife and the environment. It's often almost a critical line of defense when against bad policy and legislation, that to try to kind of stop it in its tracks. If the courts, if a lawsuit can be successfully brought against something that can be stopped there, that's critically important. And I realized that. And then when I found out there was a state, an organization within Michigan dealing with these matters at a state level, I said, I have to meet these people and work with them. And B was wonderful about saying, if you comment on something or if you take action, send me your comments, let me know. And that's how we connected on a more personal level, because I did write comments, probably on wolves and coyotes. And that's the first time I think I reached out to you and said, okay, these were my comments. This is what I wrote to the DNR, if that's who it was to. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is very, very important because we need wildlife to keep our system stable. And my gosh, are we at 4% wildlife? Or, I mean, we are at a tiny amount of wildlife left on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
This is so important. And someone was asking, where can they find out more about your group?
Well, we have a website, attorneysforanimals.org, and you can sign up for our newsletter. It comes out once a month. Occasionally we'll send out calls to action. And we also are on the usual social media. So I can send you all of those links, as well as the link to Christina's article from a few months ago.
Wonderful. Yes. And so what about writing policy now? That just that sounds scary to me. It sounds like I wouldn't know what to do. What does that entail, writing policy?
Well, it's not exactly, it's more an amorphous term, the way I use it. It's legislation, it's rules, it's court decisions, etc. So it actually, when you are an influencer of policy, that just means you're advocating for what you think the government should do about an issue of concern to you. So, for example, let's take currently and now through something like December 21st, right before Christmas, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which Christina mentioned, which is part of the Department of Interior, which is a cabinet post. So it's a federal government agency, but they are the ones that oversee the Environmental Species Act.
The Endangered Species Act.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. See why I wanted the Endangered Species Act. And they have come up with 4 separate rules. It could have been put into one, but this way you have to do it 4 times. So that they are proposing a policy. The policy in general terms is, okay, we think the Endangered Species Act goes too far, it overreaches, it doesn't take into account ranchers and people basically, and it ties up too much land. So that's generally speaking the policy. So they're the ones that proposed it. So it's not like we're sitting here writing counter proposals. What we're doing is we're taking what they wrote and using legal arguments, scientific arguments, ethical arguments, etc., as specifically as we can to tell them we oppose this policy. And how is that done? Well, the general public, remember I said the categories of influencers? So the general public the 3 of us could get off right now and go into the federal government website and as an individual write something. Organizations will write something. My guess is, and this happened about 5 or so years, 6 years ago, when they were proposing to delist the gray wolf from the Endangered Species Act in the Midwestern states, there were a group of scientists and academics who got together and wrote a comment. The media got involved, social media got involved. So policy is not a big scary thing. If we worked for think tanks, yeah, or well, let's use just think tanks. If we worked for think tanks, yeah, part of our job would be to write research papers and white papers and say, this is what should be done. But that is not the level we're talking about. We're talking about things that you can do or organizations you belong to can do. And that's the same on the state level. So, for example, in Michigan, the Department of Natural Resources is an agency under the government or under the governor. The governor appoints the director of the agency, but most of the people there are career biologists or experts. And the Department of Natural Resources is overseen by a commission. Again, there are 7 members appointed by the governor, and they have monthly meetings, and they are making policy, both the DNR and the NRC. So, for example, right now, one of the policies that they're trying to implement, or I should say re-implement, and we're watching it very closely, has to do with coyotes. So a little less than 2 years ago, the Natural Resources Commission voted to shorten the hunting season for coyotes from year-round to 9 months. The 3-month quiet season coincided with when the pups are born, and they're very much reliant on their mother. And all H broke out amongst some in the hunting community. And so I will not go through all the twists and turns, but since then, the composition of the Natural Resources Commission has changed, and now they are attempting to reinstate the year-round hunting, and by calling it something else. So now to get back to, so that's a policy. The policy was, let's give the coyotes a break for 3 months. And now the policy is shifting. And if you care about it, what we aim to do is say you can get involved, even if it just means writing an email and sending it, here's the email address, or going to a meeting, a Natural Resources Commission meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's a lot it's really hard to hear all this because my heart hurts for coyotes. I mean, it hurts for wolves and wildlife that are deemed, I mean, they're in the negative light. So thank you for sharing all this. I mean, just the simple steps.
Simple steps and simple ways that also you can think out of the box a little more creatively about your own talents. I think this is also something I've tried to do. Well, I can write. Not everyone can write. Not everyone has policy analysis skills. I happen to, and that's how I've found ways to do it. But if you're a creative writer, if you're an artist, maybe make some art about a scary animal like a wolf, showing the wolf, or the coyote in her den with her pups. And, that can connect people with the natural world and help them to see it in a different way. There are many ways. If you do like making YouTube videos, I don't know, walk around your woods behind you and show, make a video about how you connect with the wildlife there, and maybe share it around, and people might, glean something from that. And you can always put a little link to an action item that influences policy, and, people connect through the art or the video, but then that leads them on to the advocacy or even linking an article where people can learn more. and educate themselves about the science and the substance of the issues affecting these animals. So there are many ways. And, if you are the kind of rabble rouser that Bea was in her youth, you can go to rallies. Some people love to do that. Some people love to be in a crowd holding a sign. And others find that also very intimidating. And so you can do something from behind your computer screen where you feel safe. So there are just so many ways to be involved. And, you can go beyond just liking something on social media. You really can take the next step.
The other thing that you can do is talk to your friends and family.
Yeah.
Now, that 10 or so years ago, you just say that without thinking. Well, now that can be very fraught, but it's still important. I have a relatively small family. I don't have any children, but I have two sisters, one of whom has children and grandchildren. And none of the, except for my one niece, they all eat meat, but they will call. One lives in Ohio, one lives in Virginia. And on federal issues, they've been known to pick up the phone. So that's the other thing is I had my students in the undergrads in the animal law and policies class. We were doing a chapter on intersectionality, the idea that of the relationship between social justice movements and the interconnectedness of oppression to various groups. And it's somewhat heavy duty stuff. And so I had them do a little short assignment, picking someone. I said, it's the holiday season. You'll see more of your family and your friends. So pick someone and write 300 words on what you would tell that person about this idea of intersectionality and how animal abuse impacts labor, et cetera, rural communities. It's tied in with colonial, all of that stuff. So the point of it was to think about these issues and how you can present them in a way that makes your friends and family think. Now, some family members or friends will never be reachable, but I think that's a good way of looking at it. And what I find is, except for the really far gone, politically divided families, they love you, and so they're more inclined to listen to what you say, especially if you explain it to them in a way that makes sense. So that's advocacy too.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that. I mean, it's very thoughtful. You've thought that out. You've educated yourself, and it didn't take too long. You've got something doable, and then you present it to someone that loves you. And that is, and if you have that beautiful relationship already established, then you're right. It's going to go a lot farther. So that's wonderful advice. So what animals in wildlife protection right now, what do we need to really step up?
Oh, wow.
Well, for one thing, there's a real attack on carnivores nationwide. The wolves, the coyotes, out west, the grizzlies.
Bears, yeah, bears as
Yeah,
well.
grizzly bears.
Grizzlies and really, yes, native carnivores, and they're so critically important to the ecosystem and biodiversity. And I guess we should make the connection, because I know a lot of your audience may be more, focused on farm animals. This is absolutely intimately connected, right? In Michigan and elsewhere, many of the anti-wolf advocates, because there's advocates on both sides, are livestock farmers who say that the wolves are, they're predators to their livestock. And and this also occurs out west as well, with ranching. There's a lot of conflict between land use for wildlife purposes and land use for cattle raising and other and non-wild uses. So I just wanted to make that connection for people so they can see how, there's no real barrier between a piece of land that, a wolf needs to live on or a bear needs to live on, and a, farmer needs to raise something on. It's permeable unless the human is drawing that boundary, right? And so, I just wanted to make the connection for people.
The other thing I would alert people to, and this particularly I know about in Michigan, it seems like as a species, we love to categorize and put things into boxes. And in the last few years, we have seen in Michigan designating certain animals as nuisances. And that has a practical implication, meaning that it's easier to just kill them. And of course, there are words, call, harvest, dispose of. But, words matter. And a friend of mine who was making a public comment at the Natural Resources Commission meeting where they were considering this expansion. They went from something like 4 animals to 13. She said, I refuse to use the word nuisance in talking about them. And these are basically a number of squirrels, rabbits,
Raccoons, right? Deer. I don't know if deer were in this particular thing, but deer can be, they've been targeted separately through calls and under the euphemism of deer management. They are being managed. They were not part of the nuisance species, but people view them as nuisances,
Yes, when they eat your non-native plants that you
exactly. I don't want to interrupt, but I have views on this. So go on, B. I'm sorry.
No, that was it. Please go ahead.
And this is a good example of something people can influence in their own backyard, so to speak. How do we navigate these issues? Because it can be challenging. I am the first to admit, and I am the first to admit, because as someone who cares about biodiversity, I haven't personally validated that deer have a preference for native plants, because I have a native garden and I see them mostly eating the invasive buckthorn and my neighbor's ornamentals, not my native plants. But I trust the scientists who say that, deer browsing in the woods is, if they're over browsing, it is disrupting the balance, the ecological balance. Okay, I just would like to find non-lethal ways of managing the deer population versus a lethal cull. And I have worked on that issue locally here in Ann Arbor a number of years back. But I also want to tell a little quick story about that. And I worked on that project, and there were probably 3 groups involved. One was veterinarians and vet techs. The other were wildlife advocates, myself included, and the other group were hunters. And the hunters were there because they have expansive, intimate knowledge of deer behavior. They could spot the deer in the dark when we could not, with our less trained eyes. They know, they spend their lives studying deer, right, for different reasons than I might, but I learned a lot from them. And some of them truly believe that they are contributing to conservation and through how, balancing, if you will, out the number of deer. And so I tell that just because, we're all people, and you can learn a lot from people who you think you disagree with, and discover that, we do have some goals in common, and we can probably find ways to work together on some of these issues. And public policy and law and the government, everything's about compromising, negotiating, finding trade-offs. Economists talk a lot about trade-offs, and that's very important to acknowledge. So I want to put that little story out there for people to think about.
Well, that brings up something that I wanted to mention, and that is, we try not to see, the other side or whatever as the enemy. And I would say that our organization has a relatively nuanced and somewhat complicated relationship with the DNR. And there are biologists there. They're probably hunters, but they are knowledgeable, and they are not knee-jerk. They don't say, oh, if the wolf is delisted from the Federal Endangered Species Act, that means it gets turned over to state management, and we're going to immediately start a hunt. Or with the coyotes, the biologists will say, we don't have a good count of the numbers, and number one, and number two, it's not good policy to switch back and forth 9 months, 12 months, So one of the things, and Christina is involved in this, that I'm pleased about is, this is sort of a kind of a underground issue, but the way the federal government is structured, it provides funding to the states to preserve or conserve species who are endangered, but not necessarily endangered or threatened. But the term is species of greatest concern. There's another word in there, but basically you don't have to be endangered to get on that list.
Yeah.
And every 10 years, the state has to update that list, and as a condition of getting money from the Fed. So Michigan and other states are in the process of doing that. And we have contacted the DNR employee who is doing that, and he has been very open in and interested in our suggestions, and we will be in the early part of next year giving really specific suggestions. So that's influencing policy. And before we go, I know it's we're at almost 55 minutes, but I did want to mention for your audience, one of the influencers is religious figures. And teaching as I do at a Catholic university, I look a lot at the Pope and the Catholic bishops. And I will tell one story. The convention, the international convention that looks at climate change, the most influential one was in the year 2015. People came away from that with some optimism. It hasn't panned out. But a few months before, in the fall of 2015, Pope Francis came out with an encyclical that talked about the importance of creation, et cetera, and basically acknowledged climate change. And many people think that that encyclical was very influential in what happened a few months later at that international convention.
Well, that's very good to know. Yes. And these leading figures, yes, they have a lot of influence. So definitely.
Celebrities, another category.
Right. Yeah. Well, y'all, I see we're coming to the end of the hour, and I want to please everyone subscribe and check out our website, www.all-creatures.org, for a one-time donation or reoccurring donation to help support programs like this. And please subscribe. But I'd love to hear just maybe a tip from you all, and remind us again where we can get a hold of, where we can find the information. But how do you all sleep in peace? I mean, what do you do to bring yourself down?
I have learned from Wanda Nash, who is my mentor. Unfortunately, she died in 2008. But you have to keep your emotions within certain boundaries. You can get happy and pleased and excited when something good happens. You can get mad and angry and depressed when something bad happens, but you cannot be on this roller coaster. If you are, you're not going to last in this business, so to speak, number one. And number two, one of the things about being in this field is I get to meet a lot of students. And they're, it's trite to say, but they truly are the future. And I tell these law students and others that I meet, look, you have decades ahead of you to do this work. So that's how I deal with it.
Yeah, thank you. And Christina?
Thanks. I live in a college town. I used to teach college students as well. And I do draw a lot of energy and optimism from the youth, but and obviously from nature. I try to spend as much time. Fortunately, I love winter, but I try to get outside every day if I can, and or just watch the birds and the other woodland animals behind me, and other creative outlets as well. I'm a dancer. I think that physical movement is very important, and remembering that your body is very much connected to your emotions, your emotional state, and so practicing movement is very important for me as well.
Yeah, definitely. Nature and moving and learning from others, and knowing that the youth, that you all are making a big impact on the youth, is a tremendous blessing and a relief for me. So thank you all so much. And again, where can people find you?
www.attorneysforanimals.org. And I will send you all those links so you can post them. But it's our name, attorneysforanimals.org.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I feel very inspired by your hard work, and I don't feel as intimidated with the law and all the legal aspects after talking to you all. So, everyone who's watching, thanks for watching and take action. Thanks, Morning Light and JJ, for watching. And we're all making a change. So, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.